Foreign wars, due to their brutal nature, have always resulted in the development of innovative and often horrifying combat techniques. The Vietnam War was no exception. This video explores some of the most dreadful traps used in this conflict and reveals the gruesome tactics that characterize this chapter in history. Firstly, punji stakes were among the most notorious traps used extensively by Viet Cong guerrillas during the Vietnam War. These meticulously crafted instruments of harm were primarily made from bamboo, sharpened to a point, and then hardened by fire, ensuring their lethality and ability to easily penetrate any protective gear. The use of toxic substances to coat these stakes made them even more dangerous. Often, the Viet Cong would coat the tips with animal feces, poisonous substances or even poison. This ensured that, even if the wound itself was not fatal, the resultant infections would debilitate the soldier. Strategically positioned, these stakes were often concealed in pits that blended in with the natural surroundings. This made them difficult to detect, and if a soldier stepped on one, he could accidentally push his foot through and impale himself on the stake. These traps pose not only physical threats but also psychological ones. The apprehension of stepping on an unseen pit, especially in the dense jungles of Vietnam, was real and palpable. Punji traps have been used in guerrilla warfare for many years. In the Vietnam War, they gained prominence when guerrilla fighters strategically placed them around their camps and along routes used by American and South Vietnamese troops. These traps were so effective that soldiers had to undergo special training to identify and avoid them. The punji stakes were weighty. The psychological impact of the punji stakes had long-lasting effects. The realization that a soldier could fall prey to such a crude yet effective weapon at any moment made patrolling nerve-wracking, thus playing into the hands of the Vietnamese. They capitalized on the fear and trepidation of the enemy troops. The punji stakes, simple in design, were a grim reminder of the extremities of warfare, turning nature itself into a weapon. Bamboo whips, due to their versatility and abundance, became an integral part of the Vietnam War. Bamboo whips were a crucial tool in constructing many guerrilla traps and were particularly intimidating instruments. Although their mechanics seemed simple, they had lethal efficiency that resonated with the Viet Cong's guerrilla warfare tactics. The bamboo whip had a simple yet ingenious design, functioning much like a typical whip but with a deadly twist. It consisted of a strong and flexible bamboo cane, bent and held in tension by a tripwire cleverly concealed in the thick undergrowth or the narrow jungle. This trap laid its paths waiting for an unsuspecting foot or hand to brush against the wire. Once triggered, the bamboo cane would snap upright with violent force, striking anything or anyone in its path. To add to its lethal nature, the tip of the bamboo was often adorned with sharp objects or barbs. The resulting injuries ranged from painful lashes to deep lacerations that could easily incapacitate a soldier. The bamboo whip's brilliance lay in its simplicity. It required minimal materials and could be easily repaired and reused. Additionally, owing to its composition of mostly natural materials, it blended perfectly with the surroundings, hence making it awfully challenging to detect. Military personnel narrate frightening stories of traversing tranquil parts of the jungle, only to be abruptly and violently struck by these bamboo contraptions. The element of unpredictability of such traps resulted in an environment of unceasing watchfulness and stress, with no assurance of safety on any given step or contact with foliage. In a war with advanced weaponry and machinery, the bamboo whip exemplified the effectiveness of simple natural traps. The Viet Cong's ability to utilize the natural resources transformed the landscape into a minefield of peril. The bamboo whip, with its silent weight and brutal execution, epitomized the essence of guerrilla warfare: unpredictable, resourceful, and ruthlessly effective. The booby trap, known as the bouncing Betty, just like the bamboo whip, was a trait of guerrilla warfare. While the Vietnam War relied heavily on indigenous materials for booby traps, more refined devices also left their mark. One such device was the bouncing Betty, which instilled fear in troops with its unpredictable nature and devastating impact, making it a potent weapon in the Viet Cong's arsenal. It was the airborne detonation that made bouncing Bettys particularly terrifying compared to a standard landmine explosion, which might be somewhat mitigated by the. Whereas a standard landmine blast might be absorbed by the ground or the victim's legs, a bouncing Betty targets the torso and head, the most vulnerable parts of the human body. The shrapnel had a wide range of impact, causing injuries to not only the individual detonating the mine but also those in the surrounding area. The impact of a bouncing Betty blast was devastating. The mine was designed to injure rather than kill, with shrapnel moving at high velocity and tearing through flesh and bone, causing severe injuries. Troops within the blast radius were frequently affected by shrapnel injuries. Injuries resulting from the explosion, even those not from the initial trigger, were physically incapacitating and carried the risk of secondary infection in the humid conditions of Vietnam. Apart from the immediate physical harm, the psychological impact of these mines was significant. The uncertain nature of the mines' detonations, paired with the knowledge of their catastrophic results, created a lasting sense of fear and anxiety. Medical units often faced the grim task of treating complex shrapnel wounds while waiting for the chaos to unfold in the aftermath of detonations. The injuries caused by bouncing Bettys were notoriously difficult to treat due to the widespread nature of the shrapnel. Additionally, the sight of such injuries profoundly affected the morale of fellow soldiers. Bouncing Bettys were a cruel reminder of the indiscriminate nature of war and added another layer of terror to an already dangerous landscape. The number 4 booby-trap tunnels reinforced the idea that danger was not restricted to the enemy's guns, but also lurked beneath the ground. Tunnels, with their dark and labyrinthine nature, hold an inherent sense of mystery and foreboding. During the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong created a network of tunnels that served as hideouts, supply routes and deadly traps for unsuspecting American and South Vietnamese forces. These tunnels were meticulously planned and designed. These tunnels spanned several levels and sometimes stretched for miles. They contained living quarters, storage areas, weapons caches, and even makeshift hospitals. The tunnels were deliberately designed to be narrow, often just wide enough for a single person to crawl through, making them extremely difficult for larger Western soldiers to navigate. However, the intricacies of the tunnel system went beyond their narrow confines. The Viet Cong ingeniously integrated various booby traps into the tunnel design, including pit traps with punji stakes. At the bottom, there were swinging bamboo traps similar to the aforementioned bamboo whips, and even hidden grenade traps that would detonate at the slightest disturbance. The atmosphere within the tunnels was often stagnant and oppressive, making it even more challenging for those who risked entering. Certain parts of the tunnels were intentionally flooded, and others were constructed to be underwater at high tide, thus introducing an additional hazard for intruders. The hazards of these rigged tunnels were numerous. Aside from the imminent peril of traps, there was also a high risk of becoming lost within the vast maze of multiple entrances and exits. It was effortless for a soldier to become disorientated, rendering them a vulnerable target for lurking Viet Cong combatants. The narrow confines of the tunnels, coupled with the darkness, amplified the psychological stress levels, causing panic in some situations. Historic accounts of these tunnels abound with harrowing stories of near misses and tragedy. For instance, during Operation Crimp in 1966, Australian and American forces uncovered an extensive network of tunnels in the Hobo Woods northwest of Saigon. As the troops endeavored to eliminate the tunnels, they faced not only booby traps but also intense opposition from Viet Cong soldiers concealed in the trapped tunnels of the Vietnam War. Resistance and the extremes to which a person will go in protection of their homeland, specifically, number 5 tripwire grenades. The battlefields of Vietnam, filled with hazards like traps and snares, demonstrated the Viet Cong's aptitude in transforming the landscape into an enemy. Among these dangers was the tripwire grenade, which was distinguished by its lethal efficiency and simplicity, reinforcing the need for constant vigilance from the troops. This device, although basic, was effective for a couple of reasons. Furthermore, these grenades could be set up in various arrangements, either one grenade for a precise explosion or multiple grenades to amplify the devastation. The damage caused by tripwire grenades varied. The explosion could cause death or serious injury to anyone within the blast radius. Shrapnel from the grenade added an extra layer of danger. These fast-moving fragments could cause secondary injuries that penetrate both armor and flesh. Even if soldiers were outside of the direct impact zone, the shock waves could still cause concussions and other internal injuries. Beyond the physical damage, tripwire grenades had profound psychological effects. The randomness of their placement and the unpredictability of detonation created a constant climate of fear. Soldiers had to be meticulous with every step, aware that even a slight misstep could trigger a deadly explosion. The knowledge that an unseen enemy was about to strike was enough to create anxiety. Tripwire grenades also disrupted troop movements and logistics, slowing down patrols, as soldiers had to move with increased caution while searching for potential wires. In addition, activating a grenade caused both immediate harm and indicated to the Viet Cong the location and actions of opposing forces. This combination of direct destruction and covert information gathering made grenades a preferred option among guerrilla fighters. The tripwire grenades of the Vietnam War symbolize the broader nature of the conflict. In a terrain where visibility was limited and danger lurked around every corner, the simplest of devices could become the most powerful weapon. Through ingenuity and adaptation, the Vietnamese managed to turn a handheld weapon into a ubiquitous threat, reminding their opponents that in guerrilla warfare, the environment itself was an ever-present enemy. Number 6. Crossbow traps. Crossbows, ancient weapons with a history stretching back over 2 millennia, have been found. While they may seem rudimentary compared to the more modern weapons of the 20th century, in the hands of the Viet Cong these devices became another tool of terror and destruction, adding to the myriad of booby traps that plagued the jungles of Vietnam. A trip wire was built into the mechanism. If an unsuspecting person triggered the wire, usually by stepping on it, the crossbow would release its tension and fire the projectile with considerable force. The direction and height at which the crossbow was aimed varied, with the aim of either wounding or killing the target, depending on the intended strategy of the trapper. The lethality of crossbow traps was pronounced. The projectiles, often poisoned or smeared with human feces to increase the chances of infection, were designed to penetrate deep into the flesh and cause grievous wounds. The sheer kinetic force of the projectile, combined with its pointed design, meant that it could pierce body armor with relative ease. Cases of use were. Unfortunately, the Viet Cong would strategically place these traps around areas they considered important, be it their own camps, supply routes, or paths they believed enemy forces would use. The objective was multiple, not only to physically harm or kill the enemy, but also to sow fear and hesitation. Soldiers tell of instances when they or their comrades were suddenly struck by these hidden crossbows. In some cases, the traps were set in sequence, so that even if one was detected and avoided, another might be. The crossbow traps, in their silent and deadly efficiency, encapsulated the nature of the Vietnam War, a fusion of ancient designs with the guerrilla tactics of the Viet Cong. They represented the challenge faced by American and South Vietnamese forces in a conflict where the enemy was often unseen, hidden behind nature itself. Even the shadows held potential danger. These traps underscored the reality that the Vietnam War was not over. The Vietnam War, with its dense jungle and guerrilla tactics, led to the revival of several ancient warfare techniques adapted to modern warfare, including the mace trap. The mace trap is a cruel testimony to the fact that even ancient designs could be weaponized to create chaos and cause significant damage. The mace trap, inspired by medieval weapons, was a psychological and physical tool of warfare for the Viet Cong. The construction of a mace trap reminded the Viet Cong of its historical counterpart, the flail. The flail is a weapon consisting of a handle and a striking head, usually spiked and attached by a chain or rope. However, for the purposes of trapping, the mace trap was adapted and amplified in its lethality. The mace, typically made of a heavy material such as wood or metal, contained sharp objects such as nails, metal shards, or glass. This ensured that upon impact, it would not only deliver a crushing blow but also cause piercing injuries due to the trigger. Usually, the trap mechanism consisted of a tripwire system. The club was suspended, often concealed in foliage or trees, and linked to a counterweight or pulley system. The tripwire would be extended over a path or entrance, and if set off, it would release the club, leading to it swinging downward or sideways with tremendous force on the unsuspecting person. Another variation of this was the path pendulum. It was placed on dense jungle paths. This trap resulted in the club swinging sideways, like a pendulum. The effect of this was particularly intimidating for soldiers. The psychological impact of the mace trap should not be underestimated. Soldiers in Vietnam faced the added stress of the fear of sudden violent ambush by a primitive yet effective device. In certain areas, every step was nerve-wracking due to the ever-present risk of triggering one of these traps and the traumatic sight of wounded comrades. The Vietnam conflict was a hybrid of ancient warfare designs and modern guerrilla tactics, demonstrating the Vietnamese soldiers' ability to utilize every resource and every piece of knowledge to instill fear and uncertainty in their adversaries. The unpredictable terrain of Vietnam merged the old world and the new in a dance of danger and dread. Nature in all its splendor and brutality, often used as a weapon of war in the Vietnam conflict, included number 8 snake pits. The Vietnamese, in their quest to create an environment of fear and uncertainty, utilized every tool at their disposal. The ever-evolving playbook of guerrilla warfare turned to one of the oldest fears known to man: snakes. The snake pit trap capitalized on the visceral fear that these creatures inspire, ensuring that even the bravest soldiers would be wary of their next step. The construction of a snake pit was both devious and simple. Live poisonous snakes, such as cobras, kraits, or other species native to the Vietnamese jungle, were kept at the bottom of the pit. A delicate cover made of natural materials, like leaves or twigs, was placed over the pit to conceal it from unsuspecting passers-by. It blended in with the surrounding terrain. The trap was strategically positioned along paths or routes used by the enemy. Even if the victim were to quickly escape the pit, the risk of multiple snake bites remained high. Apart from snake bites, falling into such a pit could lead to injuries ranging from sprains and fractures to more serious trauma. Once bitten, the venom can cause a variety of symptoms, including blurred vision and difficulty breathing. The snake pits in Vietnam, which were traps consisting of venomous snakes, symbolized how far the Vietnamese would go to defend their territory. They exploited both the natural environment and deep-seated human fears, which underline the complexity of the conflict. In this war where psychological warfare was as important as bullets and bombs, the snake pit stood as a harrowing reminder of the treacherous terrain of both the mind and the land, where danger lurked not only from enemy combatants but also from the land itself. The spike board is one of the traps among the wide variety of devices invented during the Vietnam War used by guerrilla fighters. It may appear simple compared to the more complex snares and booby traps, but its lethality is not to be underestimated. The spike board is a testament to the Vietnamese's resourcefulness in harnessing commonplace materials and turning them into lethal weapons. It is made up of a wooden board or flat and hard surface with spikes inserted into it. The spikes were often coated with poison or contaminated with toxins, making any wound caused by them not only painful but also potentially life-threatening due to infection or poisoning. The board, with the spikes pointing upwards, was then concealed beneath a thin covering of leaves, dirt or other natural materials. This made it almost impossible to differentiate it from the surrounding terrain. The strategic placement of spike boards often caught enemy forces off guard, as the boards would be positioned in unexpected locations. They were placed in areas where foot traffic, whether by soldiers or local civilians, was expected. These areas included inside shelters, under the mud of rice paddies, along trails, and even in the shallow waters of streams. These spike boards were placed strategically in areas with expected foot traffic, resulting in soldiers and civilians stepping on them accidentally. These boards caused excruciating pain to individuals impaled by them, leading to demoralization among troops. While not as lethal as other traps, the visual image of the spike boards played an important psychological role. Removing the foot from the board posed an additional challenge and could damage it further if not done with care. Soldiers received training on avoiding these traps and providing quick and efficient assistance to injured comrades. In the wider context of the Vietnam War, spike boards exemplified the asymmetric nature of the conflict. Because the Viet Cong often lacked advanced weaponry or the ability to fight back, they resorted to using these traps to defend themselves. In order to torment their enemies, guerrilla fighters used basic resources to create traps that were effective and psychologically disturbing. The spike board was a particularly terrifying contraption that epitomized this approach and served as a chilling reminder of the guerrilla fighters' ingenuity and resilience. Another such trap used in the Vietnam War was the number 10 gas trap. The Vietnam War is notorious for having a wide range of traps. In addition to physical traps, guerrilla warfare also witnessed the sinister evolution of gas traps. Although less prevalent than other physical traps, gas traps were emblematic of the war's shifting boundaries, blurring the lines between traditional combat and biochemical warfare. These traps capitalized on the element of surprise, blurring the lines between traditional combat and biochemical warfare and attacking not only the physical body but also the respiratory and neurological systems of the unsuspecting victim. CS gas, originally designed for controlling riots, causes severe irritation to the eyes, nose, mouth, and lungs. Exposure can lead to tearing, coughing, and difficulty breathing. Mustard gas is a blistering agent that causes severe chemical burns on the skin and mucous membranes. Inhalation can even cause death. Viet Cong occasionally used homemade poison gases made by combining locally available toxic substances that could disorient, incapacitate, or even kill the exposed person and cause severe respiratory distress or death. The use of gas traps was a strategic and devious tactic where small containers made of glass or fragile plastic were filled with gas or the necessary chemicals. These containers were then rigged to break on being triggered, releasing the gas into the air through the trigger mechanisms. While tripwires were common, hidden Viet Cong fighters also used pressure-sensitive platforms or manual release mechanisms. Gas traps were frequently employed in enclosed spaces such as tunnels, bunkers, or huts to enhance their effectiveness. In such confined areas, the gas could achieve concentrated levels rapidly, increasing its lethality and reducing victims' escape chances. One harrowing account narrates how a platoon journeyed deep inside a seemingly abandoned tunnel system where one soldier accidentally triggered a gas trap. As a result of the confined space and absence of immediate exits, the complete platoon was exposed, leading to numerous casualties and a frantic attempt to evacuate the wounded from the tunnels. Gas traps were a testament to the Viet Cong's adaptability and willingness to exploit any advantage they could find, although they were not as widespread as some of the other hazards in Vietnam. This shows how the enemy was always evolving and searching for new ways to injure and kill.